The clothing process indulged in by Akaky Akakiyevich, the making and the putting on of the cloak, is really his disrobing and his gradual reversion to the stark nakedness of his own ghost. From the very beginning of the story, he is in training for his supernaturally high jump, and such harmless-looking details as his tiptoeing in the streets to spare his shoes or his not quite knowing whether he is in the middle of the street or in the middle of the sentence. These details gradually dissolve the clerk Akaky Akakiyevich so that towards the end of the story, his ghost seems to be the most tangible, the most real part of his being. The account of his ghost haunting the streets of St. Petersburg in search of the cloak of which he had been robbed, and finally appropriating that of a high official who had refused to help him in his misfortune. This account, which to the unsophisticated may look like an ordinary ghost story, is transformed towards the end into something for which I can find no precise epithet. It is both an apotheosis and a degringolade. Here it is. Quote, the important person almost died of fright. In his office and generally in the presence of subordinates, he was a man of strong character. And whoever glanced at his manly appearance and shape used to imagine his kind of temper with something of a shudder. At the present moment, however, he, as happens in the case of many people of prodigiously powerful appearance, experienced such terror that not without reason he even expected to have a fit of some sort. He even threw off his cloak of his own accord and then exhorted the coachman in a wild voice to take him home and drive like mad. Upon hearing tones which were generally used at critical moments and were even, notice the recurrent use of this word, accompanied by something far more effective, the coachman thought it wiser to draw his head in. He lashed at the horses and the carriage sped like an arrow. 6 minutes later, or a little more, according to Gogol's special timepiece, the important person was already at the porch of his house. Pale, frightened, and cloakless, instead of arriving at Caroline Ivanovna's, a woman he kept. He had thus come home. He staggered to his bedroom and spent an exceedingly troubled night, so that next morning at breakfast his daughter said to him straight away, "You are quite pale today, Papa." But Papa kept silent, and now comes the parody of a Bible parable. He told none of what had befallen him, nor where he had been, nor whither he had wished to go. The whole occurrence made a very strong impression on him. Here begins the downhill slide, that spectacular bathos which Gogol uses for his particular needs. Much more seldom even did he address to his subordinates the words, "How dare you? Do you know to whom you are speaking?" Or at least if he did talk that way, it was not till he had first listened to what they had to tell. But still more remarkable was the fact that from that time on the ghostly clerk quite ceased to appear. Evidently the important person's overcoat fitted him well. At least no more did one hear of overcoats being snatched from people's shoulders. However, many active and vigilant persons refused to be appeased and kept asserting that in remote parts of the city the ghostly clerk still showed himself. And indeed, a suburban policeman saw with his own eyes, the downward slide from the moralistic note to the grotesque is now a tumble, a ghost appear from behind a house. But being by nature somewhat of a weakling, so that once an ordinary full-grown young pig which had rushed out of some private house knocked him off his feet to the great merriment of a group of cab drivers from whom he demanded and obtained, as a penalty for this derision, 10 coppers from each to buy himself snuff. He did not venture to stop the ghost, but just kept on walking behind it in the darkness until the ghost suddenly turned, stopped, and inquired, "What do you want, you?" and showed a fist of a size rarely met with even among the living. "Nothing," answered the sentinel, and proceeded to go back at once. That ghost, however, was a much taller one, and had a huge mustache. It was heading apparently toward Overcoat Bridge and presently disappeared completely in the darkness of the night. The torrent of irrelevant details, such as the bland assumption that full-grown young pigs commonly occur in private houses, produces such a hypnotic effect that one almost fails to realize one simple thing, and that is the beauty of the final stroke. A piece of most important information, the main structural idea of the story, is here deliberately masked by Gogol because all reality is a mask. The man taken for Akaky Akakiyevich's cloakless ghost is actually the man who stole his cloak. But Akaky Akakiyevich's ghost existed solely on the strength of his lacking a cloak, whereas now the policeman, lapsing into the queerest paradox of the story, mistakes for this ghost just the very person who was its antithesis, the man who had stolen the cloak. Thus the story describes a full circle, a vicious circle, as all circles are, despite their posing as apples or planets or human faces. So to sum up, the story goes this way. Mumble, mumble, lyrical wave, mumble, lyrical wave, mumble, lyrical wave, mumble, fantastic climax, mumble, mumble, and back into the chaos from which they all had derived. At this super high level of art, literature is of course not concerned with pitying the underdog or cursing the upper dog. It appeals to that secret depth of the human soul where the shadows of other worlds pass like the shadows of nameless and soundless ships. As one or two patient readers may have gathered by now, this is really the only appeal that interests me. My purpose in jotting these notes on Gogol has, I hope, become perfectly clear. Bluntly speaking, it amounts to the following. If you expect to find out something about Russia, if you are eager to know why the blistered Germans bungled their Blitz, if you're interested in ideas and facts and messages, keep away from Gogol. The awful trouble of learning Russian in order to read him will not be repaid in your kind of hard cash. Keep away, keep away. He has nothing to tell you. Keep off the tracks. High tension. Closed for the duration. Avoid, refrain, don't. I would like to have here a full list of all possible interdictions, vetoes, and threats. Hardly necessary, of course, as the wrong sort of reader will certainly never get as far as this, but I do welcome the right sort, my brothers, my doubles. My brother is playing the organ. My sister is reading. She is my aunt. You will first learn the alphabet, the labials, the linguals, the dentals, the letters that buzz, the drone and the bumblebee, and the sit fly. One of the vowels will make you say, ugh. You will feel mentally stiff and bruised after your first declension of personal pronouns. I see, however, no other way of getting to Gogol or to any other Russian writer for that matter. His work, as all great literary achievement, is a phenomenon of language and not one of ideas. Gogol, not Gogol. The final L is a soft, dissolving L, which does not exist in English. One cannot hope to understand an author if one cannot even pronounce his name. My translations of various passages are the best my poor vocabulary could afford. But even had they been as perfect as those which I hear with my innermost ear without being able to render their intonation, they still would not replace Gogol. Gogol. They still would not replace Gogol. While trying to convey my attitude towards his art, I have not produced any tangible proofs of its peculiar existence. I can only place my hand on my heart and affirm that I have not imagined Gogol. He really wrote. He really lived. Gogol was born on the 1st of April, 1809, according to his mother, who of course made up the following dismal anecdote. A poem he had written at the age of 5 was sent by Katniss, a well-known writer of sorts. A poem he had written at the age of 5 was seen by Katniss, a well-known writer of sorts. Katniss embraced the solemn urchin and said to the glad parents, "He will become a writer of genius if only destiny gives him a good Christian for teacher and guide." End of quote. But the other thing, his having been born on the 1st of April, is true.